Welcome to Discernment Now. My name is Rich Van Every. This is Kevin Anthony, and we are back for more exercising discernment. Come on.
Back for another show about the clown world.
Yeah, it's like a muscle. You got to flex it. You got to work it, you know. This is a very fascinating, somewhat challenging, and confronting series of talks that we're having, aren't they, Kevin? Because it's just really like pushing the boundaries of awareness and also education, but then just hopefully getting to consider what's most likely true and what's most likely not true.
Pretty much everything we talk about is concerning in some way. Or we wouldn't be talking about it.
So, you know, put on your big girl pants, put on your big boy pants, and here we go. What are we talking about this week, Kev?
So the first thing we want to talk about this week is Devin Newsom fining the Temecula Valley School District $1.5 million for rejecting a proposed curriculum. So this story basically goes that California was imposing a curriculum on the school systems. But Temecula apparently allowed parents to have a say in this process of selecting curriculum. And the parents didn't like parts of this curriculum, and so they got the school board to vote to reject it. Well, Mr. Newsom apparently didn't like that very much because he's a tyrant and he doesn't like to be told that he can't be a tyrant. So he has now decided to fine the school system $1.5 million. Now, the last I heard, the school system itself has then changed its mind. It's gone back on its decision to reject it. But the parents say that this fight isn't over and that they're going to continue it. Now, okay, so that's a worthy news story, but why are we talking about it here on Discernment Now? Well, the reason really is because it's not so much that Newsom's finding them and that the school district rejected it. I mean, that's interesting in and of itself. But the important part is think about why this is happening. The parents whose children these are have gotten together and decided that they want a different curriculum. And the state is basically saying, screw you, we don't care what you want, and we're going to force our curriculum down your throats. That's the important part to understand here. You have to realize that the state and the federal government as well believes that they own your children. They don't belong to you. They believe that they own them, and it's their job to decide what they learn and what they don't learn. Now, anybody who's watching this who has children knows very well the state nor the federal government owns your children. You do. And nobody but you. And nobody has a right to say where they go to school or what they learn or what they don't learn other than you, the parent. So it's an important story because it's really showing yet again the overreach of government and how they think that they own every aspect of your life.
Yeah, this is not a new issue, but certainly something that's ramped up in the last few years, especially with this transhumanism agenda, which seems like a distant correlation to what we're talking about here. But in actuality, this agenda to break down the family structure, to demoralize men, women, and children really is a massive problem. So if you have the will, which we always do, we can always find ways, if we're willing, to make it happen and get your kids out of the public school system before they come home and don't know what gender they are anymore. Because, apparently if you deny their desire to want to maybe change their sex, you could be put away and your child could be removed from your custody.
In some places, that is
so there's certain bills in certain states that's happening already. So it's a bigger concerning problem than anyone might want to believe, because this is certainly one of the more outrageous situations we're dealing with, trying to teach children inappropriate sexual content in schools now. So
yeah, and there are certain states that you really shouldn't raise children in, and California is one of them. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the next story, which is the funniest one of the day. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was up on Capitol Hill, and he was testifying at hearings that were being held on censorship. And of course, the Democrats were grilling him and accusing him of saying things he didn't say. And so when he did respond and try to speak up and actually give the facts to the question, they immediately freaked out and immediately tried to shut him down. And you have to just be in awe at the irony of that. It's literally a hearing about censorship, and they censored right then and there, live, one of the people testifying at the hearings on censorship.
Wow. Yeah, they wouldn't want that on the public record, right?
Talk about clown world.
Oh my goodness. So in case you missed that newsworthy story, this is one of those that just should not have been, probably it has been largely ignored by, I'm sure, a lot of the media. I mean, they have been just desperately looking to ignore and censor him from the very beginning of his campaign. So now he's on a stage in which he could get some publicity, and they still are trying to desperately smear him and just really lie about what it is that he's all about.
They'll do their best to lie about him, smear him, discredit him, make him look like a wacko. None of that will actually work. Mm-hmm. So eventually, when enough Democrats support him and he becomes a serious threat to the candidate that the Democratic Party actually wants, which we don't know yet. I know Joe Biden keeps saying that he's going to run again, but literally every time he gets on a stage, he can't figure out how to get off of it, and he mumbles incoherently and says things that nobody understands. So trust me, he's not going to be the candidate. Mm-hmm. It's likely going to be somebody like Gavin Newsom, because it's not going to be Kamala Harris either. She's another babbling idiot that can't put a coherent sentence together. So whoever that is, if RFK really presents a serious challenge to that person, they'll just Bernie him. And if you don't know what that means, just go find the video of the Democratic National Convention when Bernie Sanders suddenly came out from behind stage with a black eye and had a 180-degree turn after months and months and months of campaigning and trashing Hillary Clinton. Suddenly comes out with a black eye and tells every single Democrat that they must vote for Hillary Clinton. Right.
Poor Bernie.
So,
Must be tough.
I admire RFK for jumping into the ring and for being, a strong proponent for freedom, especially medical freedom, but also freedom of speech. However, I would be unbelievably surprised if he ever got the nomination. I mean, my personal opinion is it's not going to happen at all, ever, no matter what.
Right. Not because of his qualifications and not because of his validity.
They won't let him. Here's something you may or may not know. When that happened to Bernie Sanders, when they cheated him out of the nomination, because they did cheat him out of it. They also threatened him, but that's a whole other thing. They got sued for it. The Democratic National Committee got sued for it. And in the court hearings, it came out in testimony where lawyers for the Democratic National Committee said that they have no responsibility to their members to nominate the person who wins the process. So they have this whole process of doing all these primary elections and,
that's the whole point of an election, right? Is to pick the person that has the most votes.
And they admitted that they have no obligation or responsibility to give that person the nomination.
They're not going to play that game.
And that they can do whatever they want. Yeah. So at the end of the day, they will do whatever they want. And trust me, they do not want RFK.
Yeah.
So that's that.
But take a little dose of his courage and put it in your tea, because our days are numbered. We're all going to die. And maybe we have 1 year, maybe we have 10. I don't know. But I'm just saying, if more people
Mr. Doom and Gloom
up,
over here.
I'm just saying, we got a lot of interesting things falling from the sky, and we need some more courageous men and women to roar.
All right,
what's up?
Let's talk about the next thing. This is something that it was just a little blurb that I heard in the news, and I haven't really heard anybody talking about the point I want to make by talking about this story.
Nice.
But I think it's really important, which is this. You've probably heard of BlackRock. They own most of the world. But the head of BlackRock, Larry Fink, recently said he stopped using the term ESG, which stands for Environmental Social Governance,
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because it's become too politicized.
Oh, right. Exposed would be another word.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so if you're not familiar with ESG, it's a sort of a catch-all term that encompasses a range of business practices, from curbing carbon emissions to cracking down on discrimination in the workplace and a bunch of other stuff. It's basically the way that they are forcing companies to get in line with the globalist agenda. That's what it really comes down to. The problem is that it's gotten so much attention, and it's gotten so much, and rightfully so, criticism, that they're now starting to backtrack and not want to use the term ESG. But why am I bringing this up? And here's the part nobody's talking about. Just because Larry Fink says that he doesn't want to use the term anymore doesn't mean that this is going away.
Right.
It is not going away. You are going to see it get rebranded. You're going to see them start to use different terms, and there won't be a big marketing launch. They're not going to say ESG is now whatever they decide to call it. What will happen is, slowly and subtly, the term ESG will disappear. And then when Larry's giving another interview or Klaus Schwab is giving a speech somewhere, you'll start to hear a new term used subtly. And when you hear that, you'll know that that is the rebranding of ESG. So why are we talking about this here? Because it's important to understand that they do this all the time. If we catch on to their scheme and we start calling attention to it, they generally will do one of two things.
And be able to recognize it then in the future, right?
Well, they generally do one of two things once we catch on to what's going on. They'll temporarily stop. So let's say we have a big pushback and they'll say, okay, we're not going to do it. But they never actually stop. They just put it over here in the back burner. They wait for everything to die down, and then they pull it out again, sometimes under the same name, but often under a different name, which is the second thing that they do. They just rebrand. They'll call it something else. They'll have it announced by some other person who's never talked about it before, and they'll pretend it's like some whole new different thing. It's not. It is still the same old New World Order agenda.
Not okay.
We can call it Agenda 2030. We can call it the Great Reset. It used to be called the New World Order when George Bush Sr. was giving speeches about it in the 80s. It's the same thing over and over again, rebranded.
Right. So this is not just a woke ideology arm of the powers that be. It is, in a sense, a social credit score, but for major corporations. So it's and it is incentivizing and actually almost even forcing some of these major corporations like Bud Light to go off the deep end and try this marketing out and start
that
to
worked
normalize.
real well for Bud Light, huh?
Yeah. So obviously we have Target, Ford, other major companies that have been now subjected to this. So are they being forced beyond their own desire and will? I would think so.
My personal feeling is a lot of these big companies, because they're owned by the globalists, have been on board from day one. So they're happy to go along with it. But there are smaller companies who don't want to do this stuff because, this stuff actually costs them a lot of money. And so, companies that are trying to actually make a profit and survive and operate in, say, the United States rather than having to offshore everything to some cheaper place, they're struggling, and this stuff puts regulation after regulation on them and forces them to spend a bunch of money for no reason, really.
Yeah. So obviously climate change is one of the new big reasons for so many more.
Well, they call it ESG. It starts with environmental, right? So they're using the global warming scam, or what they've rebranded, by the way.
Climate
rebranded.
change.
It used to be called global warming. Now it's rebranded as climate change. They're using that scam to try and force these companies into doing their ESG stuff.
Yeah. So keep an eye, be aware, and never, ever succumb to a social credit system, because that'll be not good. All right. So moving on.
The next story is somewhat related to this, which is that in a speech, Kamala Harris was talking about, things that we could do to save the planet. And she literally said, reducing the population.
Yeah.
Those were the exact words out of her mouth. reducing the population. So, this reminds me of years ago when Bill Gates gave a TED Talk.
Right.
The big famous TED Talks that everybody does. And in that TED Talk, he was saying something along the lines of, if we do a really good job with healthcare and reproductive something or other, we could reduce the population by X percentage. And what's interesting about that is at first it went over a lot of people's heads, but you realize that if you're doing a good job with healthcare and reproductive care, you should have more people, not less people, unless the things that they're doing are actually killing people.
Right. So I think like contraceptives or actual like using condoms and things of that nature might be the naive person's first thought of what he was implying. Like if we're just better about, especially these third world nations, not having 10 kids and maybe just 2 or 3, then that will help to solve this.
If you go watch it, that's not what he was saying.
No, but this is, I think, the misconception that a lot of people had in believing that what he was saying is not actually demonic and sinister, which I believe it is. So, yeah. I mean,
if you know his history with vaccines in India or in Africa, you know exactly what he means when he says it. But this isn't really about him. What this is about is it's just another sort of. Maybe it's a slip up, maybe it's intentional. It's just another example of what they want to do. That's what all of this ESG stuff is about. That's what all of this, climate change stuff is about. It all goes back to the 70s in a book written called The Population Bomb, where everybody got freaked out that we weren't going to have enough resources and the whole world was going to die. And how convenient for the world's wealthy, powerful elite to use that as an excuse.
Right.
To do what they really want, which is to take over the world. It reminds me, honestly, of, you remember the cartoon Pinky and the Brain?
Oh, no.
You don't remember that one? The 2 little lab mice, and one of them was super smart, and the other one was really dumb, and the really dumb one would say every time, "What are we going to do today, Brain?" And Brain would say, "The same thing we do every day, plan to take over the world," right?
Really?
I mean, that's pretty much what they're up to, planning to take over the world every single day.
So it's not just, the first goal generally, I think, or not goal, but clue is to follow the money. I think that's a pretty good indication of certain things. Then there's control, right? Implementing control. And then the most conspiracy theorist one has been depopulation. A lot of people have had a tough time really believing or accepting that is in the works. But
well, they keep saying it in speeches and TED Talks and everything else. So, I mean, all we have to do is say, listen to their own words.
Yeah.
All right.
Do not consent. All right. What's
next story. So, do you remember how many times in the last 2 years Joe Biden, the guy currently occupying the White House,
the person playing Joe Biden, that guy,
Joe Biden, you remember how many times he has said that he knew absolutely nothing at all about his son Hunter's business deals. Well, of course, we have emails where Hunter is literally talking about, Joe being part of these business deals. We have testimony from Tony Bobulinski, who said that Joe Biden was indeed the big guy and part of the business deals. We have audio recordings of Hunter Biden talking about, my dad is sitting right next to me right here while he's on the phone calls. But there's something new to add to all of that.
Oh, boy.
Apparently, one of Hunter Biden's other business partners, Devin Archer, is supposed to testify in Congress coming up very, very soon.
Wow.
And he's supposed to testify before Congress about at least 24 calls that then Vice President Joe Biden had with his son during business meetings with overseas partners. So Devin Archer is supposedly going to get up there and state that Joe Biden was physically on more than 24 calls with Hunter Biden's foreign business partners. Now, who were those foreign business partners? They were probably the Chinese business partners that were paying them millions of dollars.
And Ukraine, yep.
And Russia too, but
Yeah.
mostly
Right.
Chinese business partners. We know that one of their partners that they started one of their shell companies with, who is a wealthy Chinese businessman, is also known to be part of the Chinese intelligence services. So yet more evidence showing the criminal actions of the Biden family. So we'll have to wait and see. Honestly, I find it a little bit hard to believe that this is announced ahead of time. So Mr. Archer might end up floating in a river somewhere before this happens, or
well, could this maybe be part of a systematic takedown to have Biden just removed from his position in order to, pull off what I think they did with, let's see, was it Lyndon B. Johnson? No, who was so there was Nixon came out, then they moved in. So basically somebody who wasn't even the vice president ended up being president. That was Gerald Ford, I believe it was.
Well,
and so there was a whole switcheroo thing that went down, and I've heard rumors that that's what they're going to try and do with Mr. Newsom. But regardless of the fact, I don't even think it's Joe Biden. I think it might be his brother, and it's just all so wackadoodle. Everyone, it's just one of those things.
I don't think they're going to use this as a switcheroo. Most likely, what will happen is Archer will get up there, he'll testify. The news won't cover it. It'll disappear, and they'll just forget that anything ever happened, and that's that. That's most likely what will happen. But
has it not been fascinating though? If we can all just giggle for a moment and cry at the same time, that the man didn't even come out to campaign. He was hiding in his basement. He would, he's fallen upstairs. He's fallen downstairs. He's fallen off his bike. He has been able to put sentences together one day and then completely babble the next. Gets himself lost while on stage. It's just the fluctuation in his behavior and his demeanor has been fascinating. What do you think about that?
That actually is very common for people suffering from dementia. And if you
good days and bad days.
If you know anybody who has suffered from dementia, you'll know that some days they recognize you and they seem totally normal. Some days they don't. You'll notice that you'll sit down and have a conversation with them, and they'll talk to you like everything is fine, and then the next minute they will forget basically everything. So
and how's that? Just to spin off that a little bit with that interview that Obama did, where he said, it'd be really nice to be president and just to actually not be
we know
out in front. And,
you're referring to an interview that Obama gave where he mentioned, if I could just be sitting in the basement and calling the shots.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
I don't know if it's just him, but there's a group of Democrats behind Joe Biden who are calling the shots, because we know it ain't Joe Biden. Anyway.
Yeah. So don't get too caught up in pointing the finger at the guy who's not even at home.
He ain't at home, that's for
He's
sure.
He's more than a couple sandwiches short of a picnic. That's what I'm trying to say.
Here's another interesting story, and I'm using this as an example because this happens all the time. This is not specific to Ukraine, which is what we're going to talk about now. It happens all the time with all of these wars/military operations. So it turns out that all of the millions of dollars worth of arms weapons the Biden administration is sending to Ukraine to fight its ongoing war are ending up in the hands of criminal gangs. The U.S. Defense Department's Inspector General report found a lack of accountability in maintaining the equipment sent to Ukraine. And according to the 19-page report by the Pentagon's Office of Inspector General, a group posing as humanitarian aid workers worked to obtain a horde of U.S. bulletproof vests. And also, in August of 2022, a group of volunteer battalion members took more than 60 rifles and almost 1,000 rounds of ammunition and stored them illegally in a warehouse, presumably for sale. Now, that's a small amount.
Right.
That's not really a big deal. There were a whole bunch more examples. I just copied the first two. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because there is something known as the foreign aid scam. All right. And there's two major ways that the foreign aid scam works. The first way that the foreign aid scam works is I'm a corrupt politician, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make money. So I talk to somebody in a foreign country and I say, okay, if I get the U.S. government to give you X amount in aid, you'll give me X amount of money, right? And they don't often do it directly. This was the whole thing, the whole reason why Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma, along with John Kerry's kid, Nancy Pelosi's kid, and all these other prominent. They put them on boards and they pay them millions of dollars to do nothing, and they'll do money kickbacks and different things too, business contracts. This politician also happens to own this business, and his business will get this multi-million-dollar contract in another country. So the reason why we give a lot of aid to all these countries is not because we care so much. It's because the politicians are all getting kickbacks. So that's one way that it happens. And then the reason I'm using this Ukrainian story as an example is the U.S. Basically arms gangs, militias, terrorists around the world indirectly, but on purpose, by doing things like this. No, we're sending it to Ukraine, knowing damn well that they're going to end up in the hands of some other force. This happens all the time. We saw it in Afghanistan. We saw it in Iraq. Now we're seeing it in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So this is just another one of those scams. We know this is going to happen. So the next time one of these politicians tells you that we need to send X more millions or billions of dollars over to Ukraine, just know that it's not because they want to help the poor Ukrainians. It's because they want to get kickbacks and fund their little armies around the world.
Yeah. So similar stories, I think, with attorney generals right there. Is that, I want to say, or definitely NGOs. These NGO organizations have seemingly had a humanitarian righteous story on the front, but behind the scenes, they're just doing blackmail, dirty deals. I mean, how many times has the UN come in, basically provided aid or money, and then blackmailed or basically bankrupt that country into, bend them to their own will? And this is, I think, part of the way in which this greater New World Order has gained momentum is by systematically playing this money game with countries and taking them over.
That's the central bank scam, where they bring a central bank into a country, and within a few years, the country's basically broke, and then they're beholden to the Federal Reserve. It's a wealth transfer, money, power control system. They do that all the time as well. Yeah. You'll also notice that when we say, oh, there's this terrible dictator in this country and we need to go free the people. If you look a little closer, you'll realize they're like the only country in that region that doesn't have a central bank. Oh, how convenient. We want to free the people. Right, yeah. Free them from a dictator and put them under another dictator.
There's so much to unpack with the whole Ukraine-Russia debacle. I hope everyone's kind of more and more getting clear about what's taking place there, at least to some degree. I think it's hard to know for sure.
Nobody's clear. Yeah. Nobody's clear because nobody understands what's actually happening. And there are reports coming from Ukraine, from the U.S., from the Russia, and you actually can't trust any of them. So we don't really know what exactly is happening there. Yeah. There's a bunch of theories, and we know that there actually are no good guys in this particular thing. The Ukrainians are corrupt. The U.S. is corrupt. They want to cover up their bioweapons labs and all the corruption between the current presidency and Ukraine. Yeah. We know Russia's not a good guy in this either. So you basically have three corrupt, guilty parties all trying to blame it on the other guy and cover everything up. So we really don't know exactly what's happening over there.
Yeah, so don't lose faith, even though it seems like a vicious spiral. Yeah, it's pretty wicked. But we'll keep praying. We're gonna keep discerning. We're gonna keep digging up these stories and trying to at least unpack them to some degree. As we move forward, I think the goal is to learn to recognize patterns, right? Connect the dots, and just do our best. I mean, what else can we do, Kev?
That's all we can do. As always, what's important is awareness. So the more you are aware of what's actually happening, the more you can make good decisions. You can make decisions to take care of yourself, your family, friends, loved ones. Yeah. And you can choose how and where you spend your money, who you vote for, what organizations you support, right? You can't do that if you don't know who's who in the game, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. So be a player. Don't be a bench warmer. Get out there, ask good questions. You don't have to scream from the rooftops like some of us do, but you certainly should be doing your best to, have these sometimes challenging or confronting conversations and helping others, just even with baby steps, even if it's just a little step over time, people might begin to turn a corner and act and behave and do things differently. And that's the only way we might be able to unify, because united we stand, divided we fall. And with that,
indeed.
have a beautiful rest of your week. Thanks for watching.